Nigga, that's God power.
Praise the name of Jesus. Oh, praise the name of Jesus.
Hey, welcome back to that God Power channel. This is the channel where we're going to unlock the God Power that's laying dormant on the inside of you. But first, today, what we're going to do is we're going to break down the book of Mark like we have been doing. Last time we were on chapter 5, so this time we're on chapter 6. And if you haven't seen the chapter 5 one, you should definitely go check that out. It has like music and stuff like that in it. I was scoring it. I felt like liberated that day. I might do the same for this. But chapter 6 is what we're going to break down today. So with no further ado, let's go ahead and jump into it. So, chapter 5, Jesus left the part of the country and returned to Nazareth with his disciples. That's his hometown. And the next Sabbath, he began teaching in the synagogue, and many who heard him were amazed. They're like, where did he get all this wisdom and the power to perform such miracles? And then they scoffed. He's just a carpenter, the son of Mary and the brother of James, Joseph, Judas, and Simon. And his sisters live right here among us. They were deeply offended, and they refused to believe in Jesus. Then Jesus told them a prophet is honored everywhere except his hometown and among his relatives and his family. And because of their unbelief, he couldn't perform any miracles amongst them except placing his hands on a few sick people and healing them. And he was amazed at their unbelief. So this is kind of something to point out here because it says he couldn't do a lot of miracles amongst them because of their unbelief. So this is proof that all the miracles and all the things happen because of belief, because of faith. That's a big, big part of this chapter. Or a big part of the whole book. So anyways, Jesus went from village to village teaching the people. And he called his 12 disciples together, and then he began sending them out by twos, giving them the authority to cast out evil spirits. He told them, take nothing for their journey except a walking stick, no food, no traveler's bag, no money. He allowed them to wear sandals, but not to take a change of clothes. And he said, wherever you go, stay in the same house until you leave the town. But if the people refuse to welcome or listen to you, shake the dust from your feet as you leave to show you abandoned those people to their fate. And so the disciples went out telling everyone to repent for their sins and turn to God. And they cast out many demons and healed many sick people, anointing them with oil. Olive oil, that is. So then Herod Antipas, the king of the region, he soon heard about Jesus because everybody was talking about him. Some were saying, this must be John the Baptist raised from the dead. That's why he can do such miracles. And others were like, he's the prophet Elijah. And then still others were like, he's a prophet like the other great prophets of the old. When Herod heard about Jesus, he said, John, the man that I beheaded, has come back from the dead. Because basically, Herod had sent soldiers to arrest and imprison John the Baptist as a favor for Herodias. Now, Herodias was his brother Philip's wife, but Herod had married her. And John the Baptist had been telling Herod, it's against God's law for you to marry your brother's wife. So Herodias, she bore a grudge against John and wanted to kill him. But without Herod's approval, she was powerless, for Herod respected John. And knowing that he was a good and a holy man, he protected him. Herod was greatly disturbed when he talked to John, but even so, he liked to listen to him. So basically, John was probably telling Herod that, hey, bro, you living wrong. This is the things of God. And Herod, he was greatly disturbed because he was probably feeling loads of conviction by talking to John, but he enjoyed talking to him because he probably felt something in his spirit like, oh, this is right. Even though I feel this conviction, this is right. So Herodias' chance finally came on Herod's birthday. He had a party for his government, for the high government officials and the army officials and the leading citizens of Galilee. And then his daughter, who's also named Herodias, came and performed a dance that greatly pleased Herod and his guests. Again, like I said in the breakdown of Matthew, I don't know what kind of dance she did that greatly pleased them, but this is not the times that we live in today. So, I think it is what it is. So, use your imaginations. Anyways, so The dance greatly pleased Herod and his guests, and he was like, "Ask me for anything you like, and I'll give it to you. I'll even give you whatever you ask for, up to half my kingdom." And so she went out and asked her mother, "What should I ask for?" And her mother said, "Ask for the head of John the Baptist." So the girl hurried back and told him, "I want the head of John the Baptist right now on a tray." Now, she took it the extra mile. I think that her mom just said the head, but she wants it on a tray and a platter and all this stuff. She's going extra. Ugh. And so the king deeply regretted what he had said because of the vows that he had made in front of his guests. He really couldn't refuse her. So he immediately sent an executioner to the prison to cut off John's head and bring it to him. And so the soldier went down there into the prison and brought his head on a tray and gave it to the girl, who took it to her mother. And when John's disciples heard about this, they came to get his body and they buried it in a tomb. So that was the whole story of Herod and how he killed John the Baptist, okay? So he thought that Jesus was the reincarnation of John the Baptist. And they just went off into a caveat to show you how that story went down. So going back to the main story, the apostles returned to Jesus from their ministry and they told them all the great things they had done and taught. And then Jesus said, "Let's go off by ourselves to a quiet place and rest a while." He said this because there were so many people coming and going that Jesus and his apostles didn't even have time to eat. So they left by boat for a quiet place where they could be alone. But many people recognized them and they saw them leaving. And the people from the towns ran along the shore and got there before they got there. So Jesus saw the huge crowd when he stepped from the boat, and he had compassion on them because they were like sheep without a shepherd. So he began teaching them many things. And late into the afternoon, his disciples came in to him and they were like, "This is a remote place and it's already getting kind of late. Why don't you send the crowds away so they can go to nearby farms or villages and buy something to eat?" But Jesus was like, "You feed them." And then they were like, "With what? We'd have to work for months to get enough money to buy food for all these people." And then Jesus said, "Well, how much bread do you have? Go find out." And so they came back and reported, "We have 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish." And then Jesus told his disciples to have the people sit down in groups on the green grass. So they sat down in groups of 50 or 100. And Jesus took the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, looked up to heaven and blessed them. Then, breaking the loaves into pieces, he kept giving the bread to the disciples so they could distribute it to the people. He also divided the fish for everyone to share. They all ate as much as they wanted, and afterwards the disciples picked up 12 baskets of leftover bread and fish. A total of 5,000 men and their families were fed. And immediately after this, Jesus insisted that his disciples get back on the boat and head across the lake to Bethsaida while he sent the people home. So after telling everybody goodbye, he went up to the hills by himself to pray. Late that night, the disciples were in their boat in the middle of the lake, and Jesus was alone on the land. He saw that they were in serious trouble, rowing hard and struggling against the wind and the waves. About 3 o'clock in the morning, Jesus came towards them, walking on the water. He intended to go past them, but when he saw them walking on the water, or when they saw him walking on the water, they cried out in terror, thinking he was a ghost. They were all terrified when they saw him. But Jesus spoke to them at once. He was like, "Don't be afraid. Take courage. I am here." And then he climbed onto the boat and the wind stopped. And they were totally amazed, for they still didn't even understand the significance of the miracle of the loaves. Well, I'm going to stop right here because Jesus was walking on the water at 3 o'clock in the morning during like a storm. That had to be terrifying. And I don't blame them for being terrified like, "Yo, it's a ghost." And so they really couldn't take in the miracle or the significance of the miracle of the loaves because their hearts were too hard to take it in. So after they crossed the lake, they landed at Gennesaret, which I probably murdered that name. But anyways, they brought the boat to shore and climbed out. The people recognized Jesus at once, and they ran throughout the whole area, carrying sick people to mats wherever they heard he was. Wherever he went, in villages, cities, or the countryside, they brought the sick people out to the marketplaces. They begged him to let the sick people touch at least the fringe of his robe, and then all that touched him, everybody who touched him or his robe, they were healed. Again, that just proves that, a lot of this, most everything is happening because of their faith. They had faith that they would be healed, and they got healed. If you can remember back in the first part of the chapter, there were people that didn't have faith, who didn't believe in him, and yeah, there was no miracles that were performed there. So I think faith is the most important thing that we can have. Open your heart, make it soft. Like, a lot of things that are impossible are not. And if you have an open mind and an open heart, then you'll be able to accept the things of God. Because, like, sometimes God might show you some things like Jesus walking on the water, and it's very difficult to accept. But if you had faith, if you had an open heart and open mind towards God, then you can understand that, hey, nothing's impossible. And God's right here with me, so everything's cool. That's what I got out of it. Be sure to go back and check out that story of Herod. I want to actually know more about that. So if you have any kind of like material that has that whole story as like a side story, I would love to read that and post it in the comments for me. But other than that, thank you everybody for joining me today. Thank you for breaking down chapter 6. Next time we'll break down chapter 7. Hopefully you learned something. Hopefully you got something. Hopefully you feel empowered and emboldened to go out there and live your best life and exercise your God power. But other than that, I just hope y'all have a beautiful day. And remember that you got that God power. I got that God power.
Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah.